And we're live. Hello. Oh, we've already got people here. Hey, everybody. We were chatting about the state of the world. We would like to start by giving a negative review of America. So
Very important. You have to be critical.
we want to provide some fearless feedback on ways that we could improve.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, anyway, welcome everybody. And I'm excited to welcome one of our favorite recurring guests, Liene. Yay! You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. I am your favorite recurring guest. My name is Liene, and I am from my own channel that I have named Liene's Library, where I frequently negatively review books. Yeah, that's a part of it. I was worried because I am moving, and I was worried that everything would be boxed up, but that is not the case right now. So far so good, at least in this part of my apartment.
Yeah, the lovely joys of moving, where you get the existential dread of seeing everything you own in boxes. And
it's when you're moving that you're like, why do I read books? What happened to Kindles? Kindles are great. Yeah. Why do I have any of this?
Well, and whenever, I'm a neat person, so normally all of my things are put away, but then when I move, I'm like, why do I have so much stuff? I'm a hoarder.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Welcome everybody. Glad you guys are able to make it live. Hey, Bethany, I'm glad you can join us. Oh, I'm glad you can catch a live stream. Let's see here. This is not the new apartment, right? You're still moving, so.
I actually got my keys for my new place today.
Ooh.
A beautiful empty space for me to fill up with books.
It's so bougie and pretty. I'm very happy for you. Okay, welcome everybody. Yes, I think this will be a nice juicy topic. Welcome back to live stream. I know I've been out for a few weeks, but good to be back. Hey, Ashley. Hello. Okay. Well, so tonight we have an exciting topic, something that, I think if y'all follow the bookish internet, you probably can guess the inspiration for this, but at the end of 2020, as a lovely kind of parting scandal for for the bookish internet, Gavin from How to Train Your Gavin, I love that name, that's his channel name, did what is a very standard video for BookTube, which is your worst books of the year. And for some reason it got picked as by a bunch of authors of we don't need this kind of negativity, why are you doing this in 2020? And it just was a dog pile. It was such bullshit, in my opinion. And yeah, Bethany said she started following him, so did I. He's actually a great content creator. But from that, it did make me kind of reflect on why are negative reviews important? Why do we do them? Are there good negative reviews and bad negative reviews? And Liene was clearly the perfect person for this, because she makes genuinely my favorite negative reviews, because, well, I'll just say, part of what I think is good about a negative review is that it's coming from a genuine place. It's not coming from a place of bad faith criticism, and it's passionate. I appreciate, passionate opinions. And even if I totally disagree with you, as I obviously think you're crazy on your Red Rising, or not your Red Rising, your Red
Sister
review.
You're crazy on your Red Rising review.
You don't like the Red Rising. You don't think Red Rising itself is that great.
True.
We agree on that. So, true. But I disagree with you on your Red Sister one, but I still think it's interesting and a different perspective and whatever. So anyway, I just thought you were the right person to have this conversation with.
Well, I think I appreciate that.
Well, maybe a place to start. What has been one of your favorite less positive reviews you've done to point people to for a sampling of your work?
They're all amazing. I only do good work.
This is a fact.
It's a tough question, because I feel like well, on a related note, I feel like as much as loving something can bring you together with other people and like sharing the love of something can like make you bond and bring you new friends, weirdly hating something can almost do that more so, like bonding over the mutual loathing of something, because you're finally like, yes, finally someone is speaking the truth that I have been waiting to hear. So like my favorite experiences have usually been just generally when I post a negative review, that like when I get the response that like, I thought I was the only one that didn't like this book because like I only see positive reviews for it. So like, thank you. Like I also hated it. And you're the first person I've seen to also hate it. And I'm like, yeah, right? Like I don't get it. So like that's my favorite thing to come out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, of like, oh God, I'm not alone. Especially if it's a popular book. If you see someone else who doesn't like it, it's like, okay, thank you. I thought I was crazy here. We've got Love for Gavin. But yeah, anyway, so I thought, let's see here. I actually prepared, guys. Be proud.
The first question. Very on brand.
Well, this is off brand for me. This is part of my like new year, new me. I'm trying to like plan my live streams more. I'm trying to actually have more people on here because it's more fun when you have somebody with you. But anyway, so why we do negative? So you brought up one reason why you like doing them is that it brings out like a communal aspect of other people who don't like something. Mm-hmm. Other reasons why, well, I think for me, part of why I don't do a lot of like dedicated negative reviews, but I will in my month end, every month I talk about my disappointments, wherein I give basically a mini negative review of a few books. And I think for me, part of what I think is important about negative reviews is it's a data point for my audience of the totality of my taste. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you like, I know there's some people who watch me basically because things I like, they don't like, and things I don't like, they do like. So like, it's, even if you totally disagree with my opinion, it still kind of helps map what I think about something into your own taste, and then you can kind of calibrate it accordingly.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's definitely those people that like, if they hated it, I'm like, well, I'm probably gonna love it. So like, it's good to know.
Yeah. If someone's like, oh, for you, if they're like, oh, this reminds me so much of Sanderson's world building, you'll be like, thank you for that. I will just dip on out.
But oddly enough, and rightly or wrongly, and this is obviously not 100% true all of the time for every person, but I think it's fair to say that negative reviews, not just from me, but just generally speaking, I tend to be more detailed and more specific, because when you're enraged about something, there's usually like multiple examples, and you really like spend a lot of time illustrating not only this example, but the context of that example, so that your audience gets the full scope of why this was completely enraging. So whereas a positive review will, again, there's exceptions, and obviously there's in-depth positive reviews, but a lot of time it's just so broad strokes and like, oh, everything was perfect, everything was great. How do you pick something out when it's all wonderful? Whereas something negative, you're like, and this, and this, and this, and this. So like, honestly, like good or bad, I always have a more complete idea of what that book contains after watching a negative review, because I have just a lot more information about what's in there.
Yeah, and I think you feel the need to defend it more normally, because like you kind of want to substantiate what you're saying, so it makes you have to sit there and think like, okay, I didn't like this because X, Y, and Z, not just like, oh, I love this, and not necessarily feeling the need to elaborate. Yeah. Agree with Victoria here that reviews are for readers and not for authors. So like, one of the things that came up with the whole Gavin controversy was this idea of, well, some people defending negative, I'm interested to hear your feedback. Some people defend negative reviews as them being helpful critique for authors. And then sometimes they'll then criticize a reviewer who they feel like is not giving constructive criticism to the author. I tend to agree with Victoria. Like, somebody can just leave a 1-word review of like, this sucked or whatever. And even if that's not constructive, it is still critical, and it is still for other readers and not for, I don't know. I've always thought that was kind of a weird take.
I think that to say that an author may stand to benefit from looking at a review Sure, it depends on the author, it depends on the review, it depends on if their ego can take it, it depends on a lot of things. So like to say that there's no value in an author seeing a review, it's not true. But the purpose of the review is to inform readers. So an author may benefit if they want to, if it's in them to do so, whatever, but that's neither here nor there. That's not part of your metric when you're figuring out what you're going to be saying or who it's for.
Yeah. Yeah, negative reviews are not like critique notes with your writing partner.
No.
Or they shouldn't be.
So like another like kind of hilarious result of negative reviews that's happened a couple times to me that just completely blows me away is that in particular with my Sanderson negative review, where I spent an hour eviscerating an extremely popular book that most people give 5 stars to, I've had multiple people on the back of that review saying, I just saw this review. Can I send you my book for review? And I'm like, you know what you're getting into then.
Those feel like masochists. They're like,
yeah.
Thank you, sir. May I have some more? Well, Bethany, you're exactly right. We hate books and we want to be mean. That is definitely the purpose of a negative review.
Nailed it.
I just like shitting on people's art.
Yep. Well, I mean, there are also those people that I'm sure anyone that's posted a negative review has had at least one person comment saying, like, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And they worked hard on this. And how dare you? Or like, I want to see you do better. Like, completely irrelevant. All of them.
I haven't published a book, so yeah. I'm not saying I can do better. I'm saying that.
Also, reviewing isn't the same thing as writing. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah, and some people who I think are big readers, I don't know. It is interesting. I think some authors who are first getting started, it's so clear they are big readers, but like reading and writing are two very different skill sets. And I think like a really attentive reader doesn't necessarily make a great author. Mm-hmm. Like honestly, because I'm thinking through some friends I've had in the past who are like creative writers. And I think sometimes the fact that they are such big readers or such careful readers actually hurt their creativity in some ways because they were so in their own head about trying to get everything perfect. So anyway, all that to say, it's just like, it's two totally, that comparison always drives me crazy of like, well, could you write this? And it's like, well, these are literally not the same skills. So like, this is a non-argument.
Well, I just tend to think like, if you think of any other kind of reviewing, if it's like a restaurant critic, a film critic, do they then get told, I'd like to see you cook something better. I'd like to see you make a better movie than this. Like, no, like, being a critic of something is very different from being the creator of something. Those are two different things.
It's just it's two totally different activities. And like, you know, I think there is this sort of those who cannot do teach underlying critique to that, but it's like, you know, not everybody wants to, anyway, maybe I'm just beating that to death. That particular argument I just find to be illogical. It drives me crazy when it comes up.
I mean, where a criticism like that, or where you open yourself up to a criticism like that, is the kind of content creators that have like writing advice and may or may not be published themselves, in which case you're like, I guess that sounds like good advice, but like, what's your credentials for this? And then like, if and when they do actually publish something, well then like, you've been telling me the rights and wrongs of how to write for like, you know, this many months or years, like, well, put your money where your mouth is. Like now is the time to say like, I'd like to see you do the things you just told me that all these writers would need to be doing. Then, okay, you might be in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, you know,
different.
Yeah. If and when you get published, then it's a different, conversation maybe, but I don't know. I think this is a good point that criticism is not inherently negative. So there is a difference, I think, between critical reviews and negative reviews. I think those often get conflated, and actually even in us talking, I've at least kind of conflated those two things, but I think both of us tend to be pretty uniformly critical reviewers, even when we like something. So like, even if I like something, it doesn't mean I'm not going to want to analyze it and have critiques of saying like, you know, we both just read Royal Assassin, and I still would have the critique. I mean, I loved it, but I would also say like, yeah, I do think that there's some plotting things that I think are a little off in that book. It doesn't mean I don't love it. It just means that I can still have a critique of something that I enjoy.
You're just
That's a
trying
good
to be
point.
not like other girls with your fake bad faith critiques. The
You're
book is
right.
perfect.
I just want to shit on everything. It's so fun. This is an interesting thing. As a writer, I get told I'm betraying other authors if I don't. I'm betraying other writers if I don't give only 5-star reviews. I know a lot of writers, once they get published, choose to stop um, giving public reviews.
Or they only like they don't review it or they give it 5 stars. So like if it's not gonna be 5, they just don't review it.
Yeah, or they'll put like on Goodreads. I often see authors who will post a review, but it doesn't have a star associated with it because I think they don't
Also,
want
I
to have
mean, I'm
to.
sure it depends on what your agent and your publisher are telling you need to be doing, and also your level of success. Like, I'm pretty sure people like Stephen King, Neil Gaiman, Patrick Rothfuss, they can just whatever, like whatever they
Yeah,
feel like doing. But if you're like just starting out and like it's how you look and the PR of it and everything, you're still networking. And I mean, that's when I almost wanted
yeah,
to bring it up a minute ago, like when we were talking about, reviews being different from writing and never the twain shall meet, like the blurbed reviews that are on books. Like I understand the marketing reasons why this happens, but it feels very incestuous to have all these like blurbed reviews from authors in the same genre. Like,
yeah.
I'm like, do you really think that? And
It feels more interesting of like you can surmise some things about whose agents know each other kind of a thing. Like it's almost more
yeah.
interesting to me from like a networking perspective than like what they have to say about the book of like,
Mhm.
oh, who did you know that you could get to blurb for this?
Mhm.
Um, I do enjoy Roxane Gay does full reviews with stars and everything. So if I happen upon one of her reviews on Goodreads, I always get excited to see what she thinks about things. And I wish more authors would
And
review
Robin
each
Hobb is
other's
a
work.
pretty critical reviewer on Goodreads.
Was she?
She
She's
has
not with
like
us
a
anymore.
uh pinned thing saying that like she believes 2 stars is a positive review. I was like, well
Robin
then.
Hobb, girl, you a savage. Like, she's like,
Mhm.
be grateful I didn't just give you the one. Wow.
But
Let's
so then
see.
like if there's something with a 5 star from Robin Hobb, I'm like, well, I'm getting that then.
Yeah, exactly. Take note. Um, let's see. I do a sandwich approach with bad reviews. This is how I used to grade my students' papers. I'd be like, you did a great job setting up the topic. Here's all my criticisms, but I appreciated the time and effort you put into this. How do you approach? Actually, maybe transitioning to that, like, how do you approach when you sit down to do like a dedicated rant? How do you just sort of freewheel, or do you write down what you're going to say ahead of time, or?
I freewheel every video, so including negative reviews. But that being
Yeah.
said, like I can tell usually at a certain point when I'm reading a book if this is like a book that I'm loving, if it's a book that is like it's mediocre, I'm just gonna finish it, but like I'm not gonna review it because like it's just like or if I'm like this is horrible and I will be ranting about this. And so once I've like made that the determination, then I'm like, well, from here on out, I'm like keeping my eye out for examples of what enrages me. So I don't really write it down. I don't sticky note it, but I'm kind of like note to self, that's stupid. That makes no sense. Bring that up later. So that's really the only like preparation that I do.
I just love that you casually like what enrages me. Not what annoys me, not what I don't
Well, I was
like.
just say,
What
like,
enrages
I
me.
think I said in a recent video that, like, because I have this, reputation, which is why I'm here for giving negative reviews and for ranting. But like, I want to love what I read. It's not that I love hating books.
Yeah.
It's not that I love negative reviews. It's that I loving books, and I get really mad when I don't love
I
it.
don't
Like,
love
how
them.
dare you write this badly and waste my time?
I think some of the books I get most angry at are books that I had the highest hopes for, like
Mhm.
A Gathering of Shadows. I didn't hate that book, but I did a whole rant video on it because it made me so mad because I wanted
Mhm.
to like it so much.
Mhm.
Um, and it was that same feeling of just like, this is like such a cool premise. Like, I really wish that I was loving this, and like, it's so annoying that I'm not. Um, I want to mention this as a part of our conversation. I don't know about your analytics, but I've seen mine. People love it when other people are salty about books. So like this is part of when people get very sanctimonious about negative reviews, I always just am kind of like, girl, like you love this. I know you do because I know, well, maybe not you specifically, but the royal you love
You know,
this. Like
English
people
really could
love
use a plural and a singular. Let's bring that back.
y'all. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, anyway, that always sort of, I mean, I enjoy watching negative reviews. Like I remember, I mean, I'm naming names now, but when Zenith came out, I loved watching the negative reviews of that book because it was just so, I don't know. Maybe it's just
Well, I mean,
shocking.
anything that elicits strong emotion. So when someone truly loves a book, that's contagious, and it's joyful to see someone so loving a book. But it's also equally entertaining to see someone have the opposite reaction and to truly loathe and despise something and like want to throw it against a wall. Anything
Or
that has
like
strong emotion.
I really also enjoy ones where people aren't angry but snarky. So like Read with Cindy when she did her reviews of the ACOTAR series, like those were just like hilarious. I love just seeing her be such a snarky little, I don't know. It just made me laugh. Let's see here. Yeah, I often, if I'm on the fence about a book, will read a negative review to see like what's the worst thing that can happen to me if I read this book, like what's the worst response I might have to it. And if it's just like, oh, you know, I was a little bit bored in this part, or, you know, I thought this character didn't make sense, like I'm more likely to pick it up versus if it's like this was, you know, racist, xenophobic, whatever, it's more like, oh, okay, that maybe that I don't want to get into.
Yeah. But I do think also, because I mean, people, I don't know if people ask you this a lot or what exactly your policy is on that, but I've almost never DNF books. And people are always like, well, you only have all these negative reviews because you don't DNF anything. And I'm like, well, that is true. But also, for me, like, one, I am a content creator. So, like, I have content to create. And so if I didn't have a channel, maybe I would just DNF it. But I know that I have videos to make, and this will be something worthy of discussing because of either because it's that bad or because it's bad in a particular way that deserves attention or because it's so popular I don't understand why. So like again, because of the fact that I have a channel, then I'm going to finish it because I'm going to talk about it. And two, I do think that both as a reader, to know myself as a reader and also as an aspiring writer, I think there's a lot to be learned from reading a bad book. Because when I'm reading a bad book, I'm more analytical than when something's really beautiful and good. Like when I'm reading The Name of the Wind, I'm just like, wow. Like I'm not paying attention to the craft of it. I'm just like, it's magic. But if I'm reading something terrible, then I'm like, every sentence, at least for me, I'm reading it and going, well, that sentence didn't flow at all. It was clunky and made no sense. But why is that? And I'm like, this conversation, it just grates on my nerves. Why is it grating on my nerves? Well, this world building, it's really falling apart for me. Why doesn't it make any sense? And then I reflect on like, well, what are things that bother me as a reader that may not bother other people? And also, what are things as a writer that I'm like, do I do that? Have I made these mistakes? Like, I need to go back and make sure that I'm not guilty of this because I hate it here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you know, I finished The Black Company today.
Spoiler.
Well, I'm not going to say anything about the book other than it did, to your point, it did make me reflect because part of me was like, you know, this is just sort of like a rompy, fun fantasy. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, I don't feel like it's that deep, but it's just kind of fun. Mm-hmm. But why am I not having as much fun with this as I want to be? And it made me pause and think, and I was comparing it in my mind to, I read Thrawn last year from Timothy Zahn, which is the first in a Star Wars extended universe series. It was part of my Operation Sci-Fi. And I was
That is the peak of literature, Star Wars universe books.
But I was comparing it because I was like, it's the same kind of book to me of like, this is just like fun genre romp. Like I don't have like super high expectations for it. This is just for fun. But why is it that Thrawn worked better for me? And I was thinking through like on a kind of just writing level, what I didn't like as much of it. So anyway, all that to say, I agree. Like it does make me kind of, especially because we're content creators and I know I'm going to have to talk to people about it. I do try to sort of introspect of like, okay, what can I tell people that's useful about why this didn't work for me as well as something else did?
And then, well, I mean, what else? I was gonna say, like, I know I just said that if I love something, I'm not paying attention. But that being said, like, generally speaking, as a person, I'm the kind of person that never is satisfied with just feeling an emotion. I always want to understand why I have felt that emotion. I mean, outside of reading as well. So, like, I can't just read a book and just be like, well, I just hated it. Or like, well, I just loved it. Like, even if I wasn't reviewing books, like, I always want to know, like, if I'm happy on a day where there's no particular reason to be happy that I can immediately identify, I'm like, well, why am I happy today? Did I eat something different? Am I looking forward to something? Did I sleep better? Like, I want to know why. So
we're just analytical, introspective, which maybe speaks to why we even have reviewing platforms in the first place.
We overthink stuff.
This makes me, Lisa, this is amazing. I had an author contact me to give them a negative review because I tried to be really fair. Have you ever had an author reach out to you about a negative review?
Like to intentionally give something a negative review?
Well, just at all. Like, have you ever had somebody whose book you've read that you gave a negative review then get in touch with you?
I don't think so.
I haven't either, but I've heard enough other people saying that somebody has contacted them that I do think it's a thing that does sometimes happen.
I've been contacted on positive reviews.
But I have too. I've gotten a few authors who've reached out to me about a positive review, which I think I feel mostly okay with. It still feels like, oh, like, are you in here? Like, I don't, I'm not making this for you, but yeah, I've never had an author reach out to me about a negative one or like, you know, try to get me to take something down or whatever. But I do hear about that happening.
Totally
yeah, I mean, that doesn't, it seems to be a lapse in professional judgment, in my opinion. But
well, I mean, because I mean, we've also seen like authors go ham on Twitter, like attacking reviewers, saying that they're dumb for not having realized blah 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 blah. And it's like the worst kind of fan interaction, except it's the author.
Yeah.
Like if the comments on my Sanderson video had come from Brandon Sanderson, like that kind, I mean, that didn't happen. But I'm saying like that level of like, are you kidding me? Like you are not winning any fans with this behavior. You are only turning people away.
It is interesting because then that does make you think about the fanboys out there. Like I don't, obviously I've never met Brandon Sanderson. What I've seen of him, he seems to be a pretty affable person. And I can't imagine him ever behaving the way that many of his fans choose to behave. So anyway, that's interesting to think about.
Well, I mean, that is something that
between what an author would.
Well, like I kind of hate the fact that when I see his name or I even see his face, because I've had this frequent negative interactions with his fans, then like that name and face are like almost triggering for me. I associate him with this intense negativity and this hatred. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and that's totally unfair because like he didn't do that. He just wrote some books that I didn't particularly love. And that's all that happened with the actual human that is named Brandon Sanderson. But like him, like when I see his face, I just like think of the hordes of.
It's like Pavlovian, just people. Like. Yeah. Well, and for context, for people who, for whatever reason, aren't aware, like you had to take some of that down because you would get like death threats for having, I would say.
A dissenting opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, were you more harsh than I think some people have been in their critiques of Sanderson? Yes, but I also don't think anything you were saying was coming from a place. It was very clear that you weren't. Maybe this is a good transition point to bad negative reviews. I take the point that I do think that there are some people out there who just like kind of rip into a book just because, like it's not a good faith bad review. You know what I mean? And it's so clear from any of your negative reviews that I've ever seen that it's not coming from a place of like you were expecting to hate this book. It's coming, like you were saying, from the enraged part of you that's like, I wanted to like this and did not, and now I'm mad that I did not. But the level of just like intensity of like literally giving someone a death threat over a bad review of a book is just like, it's just a lot. So anyway, I don't.
Someone told me like they were enraged. So like, there's multiple levels of funniness to this. I was during that review holding up a floppy paperback copy of The Way of Kings. What is not visible on screen, but I did at the time own 2 other copies of Way of Kings, one of which was hardback and one of which was the UK paperback. But you can't, they're not like on screen. And this person started yelling at me in the comments per the usual, but about the fact that where they live, which was not in America, that they're not able to get a hardback edition, and how I don't deserve to have it and I shouldn't be allowed to have it because they're not even allowed to have it. And then how dare I have it? How dare I have a hardback copy? And I was like, I'm not even holding a hardback copy in this video. And you can't even see that I own it. Like, what?
What a weird...
Yeah, when I read that one, I was
just like, how dare you besmirch the capitalistic exchange of owning stuff? I don't know. That's just so weird.
Yeah. But and I was bringing up earlier that like some of my favorite interactions, like I didn't want to say my favorite negative review that I've posted is that because of what happened with it. So like I can't say that because it's triggering. But like did have so many people, because if you are looking for a negative review of Way of Kings, it is almost impossible to find, which I'd never really like looked for one before, but I made one because I review everything I feel strongly about. And then I got so many comments from people being like, thank you. Like, I've literally never seen a negative review for this. And I thought I was the only one that didn't love this book. And like, you're so brave. The amount of people that commented and said, you're so brave for posting this. And just like, good job. And like, we're cheering you on. And I'm just like, what? It's just a review.
But I do think it, and maybe this is another interesting point we could bring up, is that I do think that there are certain like subgenres or authors where there's kind of a fan culture where any kind of criticism or negativity or whatever is just like completely rejected as a part of like valid discourse about like, I hope I'm not telling tales out of school here, but our friend Alan from Library at Alexandria, he really loves the Malazan books, but he, had some critiques of them.
How dare he?
How dare he? I mean, it's just sort of like, I think of that, people who get all, frothed up about Sanderson, people who get really frothed up about Wheel of Time. Like, there's several of these big, like, fantasy properties and sci-fi properties in particular. I mean, the Star Wars fandom is pretty notoriously a lot. That where it's just like there's these cultures of kind of toxic fandom that really there's a lot of gatekeeping. So anyway, I mean, I do think it's sort of brave in the face of that for you to just fearlessly be like, I hated it.
Well, the thing was, like, I was accused by so many people of like, you knew what you were doing and how dare you complain, you expected it. It's like, I just sincerely did not. Like, now I warn people, and now I'm like, now you should know. But like at the time, I was just reviewing a book that I had read and was disappointed with, and I was like, I mean, it's fairly well known, like a lot of stuff I read, but it was hardly my first negative review of a fairly well known book. So I was just like, just another negative review for another book that I was just like, God, this did not work for me. And then the avalanche. But like that,
I mean, that was almost a daily part of our group chat was like, hey, here's the new death threat I got today. Here's the new, guy calling me a dumb woman. Like, here's the new. It was just wild.
But so like it made me feel better about my interaction, but it made me feel worse about the fandom at large when I learned that people who like Sanderson, who generally are very positive, who've dared to criticize certain aspects or particular individual books, that they get a similar reaction to what I got. So I'm like, well, I'm glad it's not just me, but also that's worse. Like, the fans are worse than I thought, because like, sure, then I'm like the one that you can come and pile on because I clearly am not a fan. So like, fine, I'm horrible. But these people are fans. They just dared to say, yeah, it dragged a little though in the middle. You must die. Like, all right, I guess I'm not surprised I got the reaction I did. If like that's the level.
Well, and again, like, I take the point, if there are people, and I've seen these and I always kind of side-eye them. I particularly side-eye them because I think it's popular to do this with romances, which I think feeds into an underlying misogynistic element within the book community. But like, people who go into a book purposefully reading it to not like it. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like that, I take the point of, I don't really like those reviews because unless they're engaged with as like an inquisitive spirit. If it's like, this isn't normally my thing, but like I want to try it, that I'm down with. But if you go into a book like I'm planning on not liking this, then like I think that those are less interesting, basically. Even aside from being useful, I just think they're less interesting.
We would agree then that across the board, regardless of the nature of the content, anything that is insincere or disingenuous is not to our liking. Like it doesn't, if I mean, a really positive,
or a positive, yeah.
Like, oh, this popular author and we love it so much. Like you can tell when someone's being inauthentic. So like, I don't really care if you liked it or you hated it. I don't care what your reasons are for having picked up this book. I just wanted to get a genuine
response from you about, yeah. Or, as we'll talk about in my live next week, people who don't even read the books that they then give really positive reviews to. So, tea. But yeah, no, I mean, I think as long as it's an authentic response, I'm fine with whatever kind of review someone does. But I agree that I think particularly giving a negative review coming from an inauthentic place is particularly in bad faith. Like it's one thing to give like an overly positive review because you're kind of on the hype train. It just feels a little differently to me than somebody who's like purposely going out of their way to be negative about a book.
Which is why I also get very offended and angry when people accuse me of reading books just to hate read them. And I'm like, no, I absolutely do not. I expect to love everything I pick up, and I'm very angry when I don't.
Yeah. Bethany, this is an interesting point. I get really angry when publicists pitch books as something that they aren't. And that's another thing I think negative reviews can be really helpful for, is helping the right audience find a book of like, hey, I was expecting this to be, I don't know, an epic fantasy, but actually really it's mostly set in our world. So like this wasn't really what I was expecting, or
well, like, I mean, I very negatively reviewed Kings of the Wild and I said in the review and in the wrap up and wherever I've talked about it that it was pitched to me. I don't mean personally, like the author came by and like did a speech at my door like a Jehovah's Witness, but it is generally pitched and referred to.
That would be amazing. I've come to share the good news of the Kings of the Wild with you today,
especially with that book. But it's kind of generally referred to as like as like the first hour, Joe Abercrombie meets Spinal Tap. And I love Joe Abercrombie and I love the movie This is Spinal Tap. So I was like, heck yeah. But the book is definitely neither. And so I did have several people, I mean, people were quite nasty in the comments on that as well, which I feel like is a trend, that if it's a book that's popular with people with a certain chromosomal combination, they are less willing to hear criticism from somebody with a different chromosomal combination. But I did have people say, "Oh, girl, like it was shocking. No, it is definitely not Spinal Tap meets like Abercrombie. Like it is hardcore not that. Like I love the book, but it is not that. Whoever told you that lied to you." And I'm like, the publisher, the publicist, like all of the like marketing stuff, all of the like blurbs on Goodreads. That's what it says. So like, I was lied to.
Well, yeah, or like Jane Doe, that was one I really liked last year, and I don't really think it's a thriller. It's more like it's a revenge story that's kind of a character study. And a lot of the negative reviews I saw that were people who were like, this mystery was so boring, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, like if you went into expecting it to be like super twisty and turny, you weren't gonna like it. Like that's fair enough if that was your expectation. I agree with this comment too. I often check out negative critical reviews right after I read a book as I'm formulating my own opinion. Mm-hmm. I also do that because I guess this is not quite negative review, but just like a way to help people find the right audience. I also try to check that for anything that might be like a content warning that books should have, because sometimes I'll see that in the 1-star or 2-star reviews as well, of like, if I'd known that this had like this specific kind of content in it, I wouldn't have read this, but like as soon as I got to that, it totally put me off. Or the representation in this was really horrible and here's why. Like I also appreciate reviews that kind of give some of that context so that I can then tell that to people when I'm talking about the book. I do hate this too when the synopsis is different than what the book is about.
But also when a synopsis tells you too much about what the book is about and you're like, well,
Doesn't
Why
that
even
blow your
read it
mind
now?
sometimes when you start reading the book and like what is on the back doesn't happen until like the 50% mark and you're just like, guys.
That actually is true of Royal Assassin. If you look at the back of the book,
That is,
I was
yeah,
like,
that is true. I
what?
was waiting. That was part of my critique of it. I was like, I kept waiting for that. Yeah.
Well, I kind of forgot that I was supposed to be expecting that because I read the back of it sometime before I picked it up. And then, like, as I was reading again, he was like sitting on my couch. I was like, what does the back say again? And I was like at the 50% mark. And I was like, oh, yeah, I was expecting the book to be about that, but it's not. When does that happen?
I know this isn't actually our buddy read of Royal Assassin, but I did realize, even as you just said that, I kind of wish that the first, like, chunk of Royal Assassin had actually been at the end of Assassin's Apprentice.
Yeah,
I think if that had been the way it'd gotten broken up, I probably would have liked Royal Assassin. Like, I think Royal Assassin would have been like a 4.5 or 5-star read for me.
It was a little bit like the Desolation of Smaug and the Battle of Five Armies were the beginning of Battle of Five Armies. You're like, that's just the end of Desolation of Smaug.
Liene, the Desolation of Smaug is literally the worst movie I've ever seen. So like, we could be here all day because
it did give us Benedict Cumberbatch as a dragon, and I will always be grateful for that.
I mean, we've got to find the moments of joy where we can in those 3 movies. I personally enjoyed seeing the elf on an elk. Well, yeah. I also enjoyed elf on an elk.
Yes.
I enjoyed that, but
Papa Thranduil can get it.
He's a Jill for you.
I love that he's younger than Orlando Bloom.
Yeah, Orlando Bloom. I mean, he's not. Don't get me wrong; he's a very fine-looking man, but he was looking a little crunchy in that.
These immortal elves, and this is supposed to be happening like chronologically before Lord of the Rings. Yeah. And like Lee Pace is younger than Orlando Bloom, which was not helping Orlando Bloom's case at all.
Well, I can't wait for, in 20 or 30 years when people are like kids are watching it chronologically for the first time being like, what happened to like Legolas?
Parents, don't make them watch it chronologically.
Well, like kids who start off with the prequels on Star Wars, that blows my mind. I'm like, okay. Okay, sorry, I lost my place in chat and I saw some really good comment and now I can't find it. Oh, well, while I'm looking for that, here's a question. Is there any circumstance in which you would not do a negative review?
Actually, that came up twice because it was a like self-published indie author, and I ranted in a wrap-up and ranted like in listicle type videos, but specifically like it was the kind of book where I felt so strongly about it and hated it so much that if it was just a traditionally published book, well, for one, part of me thinks those issues wouldn't be there if it was traditionally published because the multiple rounds of like editing and beta reading would have fixed it. But that aside, if it had been published in that form by like, Orbit or whatever, I would have definitely posted a random
a new one.
But because it was a self-pub, I was like, I feel weird, like the imbalance there. Like, I don't want to spend time shitting on this like self-published author.
Yeah, that's part of why I don't accept self-pub for review, because any book I read, I feel an obligation at this point to be honest about what I think about it.
Well, so I was honest, but I wasn't going to like do a dedicated review.
Yeah, exactly. But I just don't want to do that to somebody who, is selling a few hundred books. That just feels like
even if they're doing quite well, it's just that I know they are a one-man operation, one-woman operation. And I'm just like, you do you. I just, no.
Well, and actually recently I accepted a book, and luckily this worked out well, from somebody who watches me who's publishing a book that was really, really good. But I realized when I got into it and I was like, oh, this is really good. I was like, oh God, if this had been bad, that would have felt really awkward to be like, I know you watch me, but I hated this. But luckily I really enjoyed it. And I agree with this, Bethany. I think it's also unhealthy if you can't deal with any criticism of things you love. Like, I actually think I enjoy is maybe too strong because it does hurt my heart a little bit. Like if I see if somebody did like a dedicated rant review about, I don't know, like Alona Andrews or something, that would be like, okay, like that would probably make me a little sad. But I do think it's always, I learn something from people's criticisms. of things that I enjoy. And sometimes I can say like, no, I think you're just like wrong about that. Like, I just disagree with you.
Mm-hmm.
But other times it's like, oh, you know what? You're right. Like, I think that's probably true, but that doesn't bother me. Or, to me, that's not a big deal or whatever. Like, I think it, makes you think even deeper about things that you do enjoy.
I think we can also like solidify what it is that you love about it, and not in a way that like it's a defense mechanism. I mean, it makes you reevaluate the book and think, is this a flaw that I overlooked, or is it actually a strength from my perspective, or am I being lenient because I like this, and is that really a flaw? Or it makes you think about it. And then, as Patrick Rothfuss said, to love something because is easy, but to love something despite, that is pure and perfect.
Beautiful. The
man can write.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think, I don't know if you ever watched How I Met Your Mother, but they had this theory about when people do weird things, it can be like between people who, how to say this, like if somebody who is trying to date you does something, if you're into them, it can be hot. And if you're not into them, it can be super creepy. So it was called the Doppler-Dahmer effect. So like Doppler, like the guy who holds up the boombox and say anything. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's super cute if you're into it. If you're not into it, this creepy guy is holding up.
Well, I think that's like something that women everywhere, like stuff in rom-coms is the stuff of nightmares. Yeah. Like it's also
if you're not into it,
then it's the same plot line is a stalker plot line when you're not into
it. Yeah, and I think it's very true for some things in books of like, if you're into it, you're gonna like it, and then like if that's just not your thing, it's gonna be awful to you.
Yeah. Although, so like I was gonna say, that's also a good test of a negative review is if a reasonable fan, not somebody who can't take any criticism, does also like it. Because like I've read negative reviews for things I like. And if it's a negative review where I'm like, some of this was taste, and the part that it was taste, it's impossible for me to agree or disagree with you because it's a matter of your taste. But for the parts that you identified as more like structural criticisms that are like, you felt this was the flaw in the writing that is not a matter of taste, which I had the audacity to suggest there were such flaws present in The Way of Kings. And for that,
how dare you? How very dare you?
But I do think that like there are things, I mean, it's always like, it's a spectrum, but I think there are things that are more purely your taste and things that are more like a structural, actual objective criticism that is like, this is bad writing. So like, there's obviously like a spectrum there. And so I tried to identify things that were my taste versus things that were like, if I was like an editor, I'd be like, this is not my taste. I'm just saying like, this is paced poorly. This is poorly explained. These are like structural things that I'm like.
I think also another thing that comes into that or like kind of gets layered on is like, what is it that the author's trying to do? Right. Because like, I think of things that, that I will describe sometimes as kind of reading like fan fiction. And I know that could come off as a negative thing, but I actually quite enjoy that when if it's part of what the author's trying to do. Like it's meant to be really kind of like sudsy and like, hey, like don't worry about like the world building here. Like that's just not really what we're doing. Like we're just having fun. Like, if that's what the author's going for, I'm not going to criticize like, oh, well, I felt like this was really poorly explained because like, that's clearly the tone of the book. Mm-hmm. Whereas like, if it's a high fantasy, like, or a classic where the point of the book, a lot of it is the writing. So if you don't like the writing or if there's like, things that you think are not good about the writing, like that is a real issue intrinsic to the book. So I also, I think it's Roger Ebert who had that scale of like, he would give a popcorn movie five stars or whatever, because that's what it was. If it was a good version of what it was trying to do, that was fine. So anyway, there can be like bad things about a book that you can still enjoy.
Not to bring up Way of Kings again, but like because it's this epic high fantasy that's marketed to adults as an epic high fantasy, then I was like, I'm gonna be critical of a magic system and world building. Like there's no passes to be given this. So if I find things that are poorly explained or don't make sense or fall apart, like this isn't one of those situations where you can be like, oh, but it's just like a fun adventure. Oh, it's just a little romance and like so the magic's a little. It's like, no, we're pretty much here for that. For the world building and the magic. So if those are the things I have issues with, we have a problem. But
yeah, because I
to your
wouldn't say
point,
Sanderson is like a great stylist, so it's not like you're reading for like the beauty of the writing or yeah.
yeah. And again, I feel like I think it'd be fair to say the project of the book is this world building. So like,
Yeah.
but conversely, like people like to shit on Riverdale, and Riverdale is one of my all-time favorite shows. But by like, to use your words, like it is so succeeding at doing what it has set out to do, like
Yeah.
better than any other show that's well, there isn't any other show doing what it's doing. So like people just like to write it off as like, oh, that's just a dumb teen drama, but it's not though. And if something that was like, you know, on HBO was doing what Riverdale was doing, it'd be lauded for its brilliance and for its homage and for its pastiche. But because it's on the CW, then people are like, oh, well, that's just a stupid teen drama. And you're like, I don't think you watched it.
Well, and actually, I also think things cannot be that deep and still be good. Do you know what
True.
I mean? Like, I think it's totally fine, you know. I'm trying to think of an example. And nothing's coming to mind off the top of my head, but just like there's some things that it's like, yeah, I made a video called Bad Books I Kind of Like. And it's just like, yeah, this book, I'm not arguing this is like great, but I liked it. It was fine. Like it did what it was supposed to do. It was an that's maybe what I'm getting at. There are things that are meant to be purely entertainment. And I think there's a propensity to sort of like, it has to have deeper thematic content to be good. And it's like, no, some things don't have that. And that's okay. Like it doesn't, not everything has to be, you know,
But if a popcorn movie fails to entertain, then it's truly
if
bad.
If I'm bored in a popcorn movie, then like fail. It's awful. Like Honey. Did you
like
ever see
Batman versus Superman?
I heard about that mess and I just stayed away because I heard Wonder Woman, the new one's not very good.
Oh,
and like for those,
those,
it's like, okay, if I'm not having fun, like what's the point? Like that's the whole reason I'm watching this. So I thought this is an interesting question because I actually think I know what you will say, and I think it's not going to be Sanderson. What's the most toxic fandoms you've been dragged into besides Brandon Sanderson?
Well, I mean, so what to say dragged into means that you are now like a participating, you know, card-holding member of said fandom,
well,
or does that mean you've interacted with them?
Yeah, maybe what's some of the worst run-ins you've had? I think I know what your answer is going to be.
I don't know what my answer is going to be because all my automatic answer is Sanderson.
Well, wasn't Dune awful? I thought Dune was the worst one you've had.
That is true. I blocked it from my memory.
and you didn't even, it wasn't even a full, I think you gave it like 3 or 4 stars. It wasn't even like you hated it. It just
I gave it 3 stars and had the audacity to suggest that while it is a classic for a reason and it is like, you know, the grandfather of this genre and for that it deserves all the credit in the world, it is dated and it is flawed and it has pacing issues and it is like slightly racist. But I was like, yeah, it's classic for a reason for sure. Like it's great to see the origin of like when you read it, you realize just how many things were influenced by it. And you're like, yeah, like you did your own thing, sir, in a way that no one had before. So credit where it's due. Like that's incredible as an achievement. But as a reading experience, it was the 3.
Well, that's the thing. For books like that, it's interesting to rate them or review them because they're working on 2 levels. Like you can appreciate what they've done for the genre, even if you didn't personally enjoy it. Yeah, there's been some romances I've read like that where I read them because they're like foundational to the genre, but like I did not enjoy them at all. Like they were not to my taste, and I don't think they've aged well. But you know, I can still say like, yeah, okay.
But I would say, I mean, that's again that's part of what makes a good negative review is touching on all the aspects and influences and lenses through which you're viewing this story and this writing, and like you're never reviewing something in a vacuum. So like if you're coming at it as like, you know, this is a classic for a reason, but it's super, super misogynistic and I can't not see that. Or if it's a new book and you're like, I am like, it's tainted by its popularity. So my expectations were higher than they would normally be. And that was to its detriment because it really let me down. Like those are all important things to note in a negative review because it's never just you and some words and like, there is no world. Like there is always a world.
Yeah, that drives me a little crazy with people who are hardcore, like, separating the art from the artist. Like this, it's not even just the art from the artist, but like the art from any context. And it's like, that's just not reality, I think. Like some of it's mood based. Like maybe I was in a crappy mood that day and therefore didn't like this book as much as I might have, or maybe I was in a super good mood and so I ended up liking a book more than I would have otherwise. Or I mean, it's just to that point, Ashley says all the negative reviews of Black Leopard, Red Wolf made me set my bar so low that I ended up loving it. So I appreciated this review so much.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Get really tired of shallow reviews that are, I just like this. People can do what they want, of course, but I want more from BookTube. And Tia says Ashley and Brie apparently were talking about that quite a bit. That is a pet peeve of mine.
What's the point of you as a reviewer if you're not going to review?
Well, everyone should do what they want with their channel. I do not personally enjoy wrap-ups that basically are like, I read this book. Here's what it was about. It was good. 5 stars. And then the next book is like, I read this book. Here's what it's about. It was okay. 4 stars. That's just not my personal taste in content. So
as we've said, like you're usually able to determine whether it is or isn't for you, possibly because this is a person whose taste aligns with yours. So just knowing that they liked it is a vote in its favor. But if it's not someone whose tastes yours align with so perfectly, if someone can tell you what they did or did not like about it, you can say, you hated it, but that sounds like my jam. Or you loved it, but my God, those sound like horrible things. I hate everything you just listed as your favorite thing. I'm never reading that.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Jashana. Yes, the church says welcome at my door is the Church of the Good News of Murderbot. I am the lead evangelist. I'm working on our tracks right now to start going door to door. I'll wear like a little button up, like I'll do the stereotypical like Jehovah's Witness outfit, and then I'll have my little tract of like.
Can I wear like a wolf? Good news of Murderbot? Start telling people about the wolf.
Yeah, well, I think we can have like a whole cadre of different evangelists that we can.
It's like trick or treating, but bookish. And instead of getting treats, we give out books. It's perfect.
We proselytize these books. Let's see here. Oh, okay. I didn't know this. It gives it for something that happens 100 pages in. Sometimes you wonder. I know the marketing departments are just in charge of getting people to read things, but it's like,
well, yeah, I mean, so like, actually, when Bethany was talking about how like, when something's mismarketed, I'm so tired of everything being The Hunger Games and Game of Thrones. Not everything.
Harry Potter.
In fact, not Harry Potter so much anymore because of reasons, but like, again, like, yeah. Okay, so it had a battle in it, so now it's Game of Thrones. Like,
yeah, it was.
There's a bad government,
so it's the Hunger Games. Yeah. And again, I get why people do it, and sometimes it's helpful, like,
in selling books.
Sometimes especially to communicate tone of a book. I think sometimes those can be helpful comparisons.
If it's sincerely a good comparison, but oftentimes it's not.
Yeah, that's true.
When I picked up Name of the Wind, it was like I didn't know about it at all. I just randomly picked it up at like a half price books. It was like a $2 mass market, and it was like blurb to saying, "Oh, this is the next George R.R. Martin," and I was like, "All right." And the Name of the Wind is a great book, but it could not be more different from A Song of Ice and Fire.
People compare those two?
They didn't say it's the next Game of Thrones. They said Patrick Rothfuss is the next George R.R. Martin. I guess there's some wiggle room there to say he's like as great a writer, but like obviously you're giving people the impression this is going to be like Game of Thrones, and like 2 high fantasies with like white male protagonists could not be more different.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I don't know, like sometimes it's like, oh, this has like a female protagonist. That means these are the same. It's like, no, I know that maybe they're a rarity in this subgenre, but that doesn't mean that all the books that have a lady as the lead are the same. Let's see here. I'm trying to catch up with chat. Let's see here. People talking about, oh, here you go. I'm not sure if you take sponsorships, but if you do, would you ever feel inclined to give it a positive review? I think, is this trying to get at like, maybe I'm not totally sure where this is getting at, but
publishers promote a book that's coming out and they get
does
sponsored to
it?
promote it.
Yeah, I mean, I got a sponsorship for the Jane Austen Society last year, but it was to do a video based on Jane Austen, not to review the book. And I personally have never and would never take a paid review because I just don't think that's like, I frankly just don't think that's ethical. I always am thinking about the fact that people do take my recommendations, and I would feel really bad if somebody spent money on a book that I had given a review that was paid to give.
It taints all of your other reviews, because then when are you honest? What does it mean to say that you like this? Does it mean anything?
Yeah, and I think I've gotten 1 or 2 offers from like more mainstream publishing for that, but most of the offers I get for that are from people who are from small presses or self-pubbed, and maybe they just don't know that that's not really industry standard.
I think any content creator can like attest to how many authors just don't know how to go about creating a relationship with the content creator or getting attention for their book. Like copy pasting the same, I didn't watch your video, but I'm just going to leave a comment telling you about my book on every video that they can find this BookTube video. Not a good strategy.
We do in our world
have the same comment.
In our World Hoppers Discord, it's like there's a couple of them that it's just now sort of like almost a meme within our chats of like, so and so showed up promoting their book again today. Here it is. Yeah, so and Bethany's saying she doesn't do that either. I actually don't think it's all that common for people to do sponsored reviews. I've seen people do sponsored other content on behalf of a book, and I don't have a problem with that. But anyway.
But I guess, I mean, I feel like that person may have been asking, I might be wrong, that not that you were paid to give it a positive review, but because you were paid to promote it in some capacity, that you feel there's like an onus to be more positive.
I think that that's probably true, just like on an unconscious level. I think that that's
like money, so
well, or not even money, but like I think, and I even have this in my review policy. If I've been given a book for review and I'm between a rating, I will always err on the side of rating it up. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's an intrinsic bias. I don't know. For me, it's more just like, well, this book is like first coming out, and if I have the opportunity to be generous to it, I want to do that.
Well, I just feel like that's a good policy to have just generally in all reviews, because it doesn't hurt you any to round up. And if you're going to have to round up or down, you may as well round up, because it doesn't hurt anything to do that.
Yeah.
It can only.
So, I mean, I think just like, you know, if you have home training, you want to be nice to people who have given you something to read early. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that there's some level of an unconscious bias there, but I don't know. I try to be, I mean, I've gone in on books that I've been given for review, so hopefully I've proven that I'm willing to do that. But
I was trying to reference pitch meetings, and you didn't even register.
Oh, hey, Rachel. Let's see here. Let's see here. I also had one other thing I was going to ask you. Do you have any other people's negative reviews that you particularly enjoy? I'm on record as you being my personal favorite purveyor of negativity. But do you have other people who you enjoy watching their negative reviews?
I mean, I don't know that I have a particular person who like I specifically like their negative reviews are like, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of people whose content I like and that I also really enjoy. I mean, because like we've said, when you really hate something, that tends to elicit strong emotion. So like the most passionate you see a person is frequently on a negative review. I mean, well, honestly, Alan from the Library of Alexandria, like his 3 parts, his ACOTAR vlog, and that was I mean, when we talked earlier about like you shouldn't pick up something that you knowingly are gonna hate. I mean, this was a different circumstance because he lost a bet and was being made to read it. Like he didn't set out to disingenuously review something in order to be negative. But so like, you know, that was the most genuine, like, constant rage that I've ever seen. And I'm like, how can you not? And it's I feel like it also goes to show that being able to identify whether or not someone is being sincere has nothing to do with how loud or fast or how, sweary they talk. It's you just person to person. One person's like quiet, calm rage is like completely sincere, while another person like screaming about it and feel kind of mediocre about it. So like,
no, that's a good point. I think, this maybe gets into even a different conversation about, I think people sometimes feel pressure to have a certain persona that I personally don't always really enjoy, but again, everybody can do what they want with their channel.
I learned a lot about my voice from my Way of Kings review. Apparently I have too much vocal fry.
I mean, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. I'm glad they finally gave you that fearless feedback.
Someone asked me if I had a frog in my throat, and then they like ribbited in the comments, and I was like, okay.
You never become more aware of your own vocal tics until you have to edit yourself on film. So I don't know. I didn't realize I had vocal fry until I could see it literally in the audio track on my
almost everyone has vocal fry, including men.
Yeah, it's a generational affectation. Younger people in general just are more prone to have it in both genders. So, what about you, Mara? Who's the worst fandom besides Sanderson you've run into? I would say Christy. Now, most of the people that isn't that hilarious? Yeah, most Agatha Christie fans I have met are absolutely lovely. And they're also nerds like me, and it's wonderful. There are a few Agatha Christie dude bros, though, who will find my videos and then just like, I see a string of comments on them, like they're just going through them one by one, explaining why I'm dumb about Agatha Christie, and it's just like, okay.
Like, Mara, we're just a couple of dumb women, and we're just sitting here patting ourselves on the back, but we're just in our own little bubble of dumbness. We can't help it.
I'll humble brag and say that the International Agatha Christie Festival told me that I am the best living reviewer of Agatha Christie. So whatever, I'm gonna just decide to take their opinion.
Into your channel banner so that you could just be like, right there, guys, right there.
Now, granted, they could have been blowing smoke up my ass. I don't know, but I just because I'll have moments where I'm like, am I dumb about it? Like, have I just been? Did I totally waste my time making these?
Insidious thing. People who's like, you have no what are their credentials to say you're a bad reviewer? They're just some random, user number 84, and you're like, they're in your head because you're like, do I not make sense? Do I not justify my arguments? Am I wrong? Did I miss it all? Am I stupid? Oh no.
Well, and like, I'm always open to being like, hey, I think you didn't get I think you missed that this happened. Like, if I misstate, like, what happened in a book. Yeah. Well, I'm open to a little bit of, if it's true. Like, if I'm like, oh, and then this happened and I didn't like it because this, and someone comes back and says, oh, I think you missed that in between those two things, this other thing happened, and that's why, whatever. Like, we're all human. I make mistakes. But
she clearly didn't even read it.
Yeah. Whenever I get those, I'm like, I mean... You cannot like my opinion, but I did read it. Nope. Oh, hey, Ashley. Yes, you heard your name, so you came running. Okay, yes, this arrived for me in the mail today, and I'm really excited about this. It's called Amari and the Night Brothers. It's middle grade fantasy, and it just seems really delightful. Middle grade fantasy has become my new comfort read recently, because it's just such a wholesome, pure world of niceness.
Who writes
distracts me from our ongoing coup. Who what?
You know who writes middle grade fantasy?
Neil Gaiman. I went through which five is she gonna bring up? Which what's the right answer to this trivia question?
Everyone take a shot.
Yep.
It's that time of the night.
Abercrombie will come back around here in a little bit.
He does not write.
Okay, on one of my recent videos, somebody suggested that I get a custom button installed so that every time somebody reads Murderbot, they can click it and let Tor know that I made them read it, so that I can get some kind of commission structure going here. Let's see here.
Can it be the murder button?
I see what you did there, and I'm gonna tell you I loved it.
Good, because I'm like,
that's because I
I'm
like that.
composed of 90% dad jokes.
I have nothing but time for dad jokes. Let's see here. Yeah, everybody attesting to the good news of Murderbot. Also, yeah, see, here you go. The worst fandom I've encountered are the butthurt Red Rising dude bros on my Red Rising rant review. Actually, that's part of why I didn't do one. Well, also, I didn't hate it. I just had problems with it, so I couldn't gin up the correct level of passion for a dedicated review.
Oh, damning with faint praise.
Well, I basically just felt like it was kind of derivative, and it was fun. It was okay, but I had some problems with it, and it did not entice me to continue. That's really all I have to say about it.
I feel like this is when you say, love me or hate me, but don't ignore me.
Yeah, it's like, what's the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference, and that's how I felt.
Oh, it burns. It burns.
Yeah.
Okay, so for Red Rising, one of the things that I enjoy a lot is Pierce Brown himself, because we've been talking about the types of like pedantic fans that are like, this specific detail of this specific book and I remember it and you don't, and therefore I'm a true fan and you're not, and you're dumb and you don't know what you're talking about and you actually hate this book. Like that fan. Like that fan's interactions with Pierce Brown don't go the way that they wanted, because Pierce Brown's the first to be like, it's fiction. There's no science. There's nothing that happened in between the scenes I wrote, because I wrote everything that happened, because this isn't real. So, like, he completely shuts that down.
I just have so little time for anybody being unkind to each other over things that are literally made up. Literally made up out of whole cloth. Bethany is spilling some tea in the chat. There are people who do sponsored reviews and may not disclose. Super unethical. And Ashley points out that is against the law.
So which is true. Is this the beginning of a Red Scare, and now we're all going to be reporting secretly on our neighbors that like they actually were sponsored for that?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's unethical. B, again, I always think about, I don't know. I'm sure you get this too. People who tell me like, oh, I went and bought this because you recommended it to me. Like, that wouldn't sit right in my spirit if I was like falsely like trying to get it up for a book that I didn't actually like for money. And then somebody took that and bought it. That just really, yeah. Yeah, exactly. My Viagra fake.
Pay to play.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, I would feel terrible about that. And then 3, these things get around. Like people, we gossip, we talk. Like if you do that, like, people will know.
I mean, real talk, you're just not that good of an actor. We can tell when you're faking it.
Well, that's the thing. I'm a terrible liar. And also one of the comments I got on my best books of the year was like, you're just so happy in this video. And I'm like, I know. I'm like, when I'm happy about something, I'm pretty transparent about it. So I just think people could tell. I did like the Jane Austen Society. I gave it, I think, 3.5 stars. It was cute. It was really fun. So I agree. But I didn't give it like 5 stars because they sponsored a video for me at some point.
You know, this does make, I mean, not this last thing you said, but like, I obviously encounter the negative end of huge fandoms when I don't like the book, but there's no reason for me to have encountered negative, like, components of fandoms that I'm a part of where I like the book. So like, it does always give me pause. Like, is there the Sanderson Dude Bro equivalent in something that I really love? Like, are there Abercrombie Dude Bros out here just like destroying? I've never heard that anyone gets that kind of hatred for First Law.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
And then that always makes me question, and that makes me analyze, like, what is it about the nature of this particular story that brings a run-in, the type of fan that is so, like, gatekeepy versus the type of story that doesn't bring that out.
Yeah, that's an interesting, because like I'm thinking, for example, I mean, Alona Andrews is my favorite currently writing author. And most of the comments I get on anything I do for Alona Andrews is just like, oh my gosh, someone's talking about these books. Thank you. Like, I think not as many people talk about Abercrombie in the way that you do. Like, I think you're one of the more prominent people who like is full in on Abercrombie, whereas I feel like there's, you know, a good number of people on BookTube who are like full in on Sanderson. So maybe it's also just a question of like,
but so again, like that very thing, like that doesn't happen by accident, if you know what I mean. Like something about the nature of, you know, the Cosmere is something around which fandom form.
Are we developing like a QAnon like conspiracy theory? Like, does the Cosmere like bring out an evil part of your soul if you get into it too deeply?
I think it's not even evilness. It's just like the kind of story that it is. And like, I am obviously not the expert, and I've been told many times, but like, just the fact that the Cosmere is this interconnected universe, like it's something like, it's the kind of thing you get with Marvel, where like there's like Easter eggs and there's like stuff to pick apart.
That is, yeah, it's a different kind of world. Yeah. That's very true. Like where it rewards nitpicky, nerdy, like engagement in a way that I don't think Abercrombie does. Yeah, like I think that is it. The ones that are more like world building forward, maybe.
Yeah.
Invite that.
Well, it's also, I mean, like, I mean, obviously, I think there's a lot to talk about with Abercrombie, but the kind of things you're talking about, like, I don't think that it's especially productive, and I think there's a reason you don't see that video of like fan theories for the first law, because it's not the kind of thing where you're like, what does this actually mean? Or like, who is this secretly going to be? Or how does this magic MacGuffin actually work? Like Abercrombie, like there's a lot to unpack in the Machiavellian politics and the like,
but it's more like character driven.
Yeah. And so like there's a lot to discuss, but it's not the kind of thing where you're like, let's collectively guess at like what Abercrombie is going to think of next. Like it's just not that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. Yeah, for sure. I just want another love for Alan's rants, and hello to Jesse. We've actually got a lot of world hoppers who've been hopping in and out of here tonight. So, let's see here. I also really love Dominic Noble. I don't know. Do you watch him? I think
not regularly, but when you talk about something that I like, I watched his Rebecca because I just watched it and was horrified.
Yeah. Well, I think he's a good example of somebody who does good faith negative reviews of things that are outside of his comfort zone. Like he's done negative reviews of like the 50 Shades books, but I think those were all in very good faith, and they weren't just like, oh, I'm a dude shitting on romance novels. Do you know what I mean?
Was it him, or I know someone, like I remember seeing this thumbnail.
Dan Olson, Folding Ideas. Are those the ones you're thinking of?
Was it somebody did a lukewarm defense of Twilight or something? Yeah.
Yeah, Folding Ideas. And I think those were also a good example of good faith negative reviews. But yeah, Jenny Nicholson, I like that. I mean, that Jenny Nicholson. I rewatched that Brony fandom one. I'm gonna say at least once every other week, because I just love that video. It's one of my favorite videos that's ever been made.
I've already started rewatching her Vampire Diaries one, and I watched it all the way through the first day that it came out.
Yeah, she's a treasure for us all. Let's see here. Yes, I love your voice too. Very soothing. The Christie fans are, for the most part, they are wonderful and lovely. And I will say there are dude bros, but most of the fans that I've had the best interactions with were also gentlemen. So I don't think it's just a gender thing. Can
you please do a fan, like a theories video for Agatha Christie? Like what comes next?
Bros. I mean, literally nothing.
Well, not with that attitude.
Yeah, that's right. I should do like a fan theory video for Alona Andrews and let everybody get mad at me about that. But I think we all have the same fan theory about what's going to happen, so it would be very interesting.
Then all of your comments will just be like, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, we'll be like, yeah, you're totally right. I get this a lot now. I just got so sick of hearing it. I had to change it. I don't know if you get this with your stuff, Liana, if you get sick of your own voice.
Yeah. Well, I don't really have an intro, but I've developed accidentally something of an outro. And because I can feel myself turning into like an answering machine that's just like on autopilot as soon as I hit that part.
That's what I do for my outro.
I'm just like, you know the thing and the whatever, bye-bye.
Well, I think it's helpful, especially when you're first getting going, if you have like a way to get in and a way to get out of a video, because it's just like learning to talk to yourself in front of a camera is a skill and it feels really awkward. So I think it can be helpful to kind of get there. But yeah, I get that. People also say they miss my original music, but again, I was just so sick of hearing it. I may go back to it at some point, but I just needed a change. So
it occurs to me that there's very few people who I actually know if they have, and if so, what is their outro? Because you can tell when someone is about to wrap up. And by then I'm like, well, they're just going to tell me that like this is their upload schedule and like where else to find them. And I already know all that stuff if I follow them. So as soon as someone gets that tone of voice where they're like, and you're like, okay, well, clicking off now. I'm going to watch something else now. Like, I don't even know what
analytics, Liana. How dare you?
So like when I do mine, I'm like, is anyone even watching this outro? Like y'all already left anyway. So like who am I talking to? No one.
Well, way to crush my dreams that people are listening to every blessed word I say.
I mean, they're probably listening to you. They're just not listening to me.
I stay. I've heard fantastic things.
Never heard of it until this
about this. Can I tell you what it's about? Because it's, first of all, just look at the cover. It's so cute. Okay, so I know that's superficial, but I care. So Amari has a missing brother named Quentin, and she thinks he's alive. Everybody else thinks he's dead. And she finds a ticking briefcase in his closet containing a nomination for a summer tryout at the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs. And she's certain that the secret organization holds the key to locating Quentin. If only she can wrap her head around the idea of magicians, fairies, aliens, and other supernatural creatures all being real.
And you had me at brother and sister.
Anytime there's a
story, I'm just like, okay, I will read this.
Now she must compete for a spot among the kids who've known about magic their whole lives, and she hasn't. And it just sounds really lovely. So anyway, I'm really excited about this.
You better freaking find your brother, otherwise I'll be so mad.
I know. Well, it's middle grade fantasy. Come on. You know. We all know. Actually, now that I say that, part of probably what I'm loving about this is the same thing I love about romance novels, which is like, I know how this is going to end. Same thing for mystery. I'm like, I know this is how this is going to end. So there's just something very comforting about like,
okay. I don't really read them much, but I like, that's why I've seen all the Marples and Poirots, because like, I just want him to show up, to be mean to everybody, and then to invite everybody into the drawing room so that he can like red herring accuse 5 people and then tell us who really did it. And then that person will confess and we're done for the night. I love it.
I just want the consistency. It's like Law and Order. It's like there was going to be an investigation. They'd arrest someone. We'd see the trial and then we'd see the outcome, like just every time. This is very true. I highly recommend, if people are interested at all, actually, even if you're not, literally the best documentary I have ever seen in my entire life is called Paris is Burning. It was made in the late 80s, early 90s, and it's all about Black and Hispanic drag culture in Harlem in New York City in the 80s. And it gives you the full rundown on where so many of our kind of like internet slang comes from. It comes from queer communities of color, basically. And this documentary, I have never seen. I think it's like 70 or 80 minutes long. It's not very long. And it addresses like socioeconomics, gender, race, sexuality, like the number of ideas and themes it packs into that time is astonishing. Plus there's drag queens, and it has one of the wildest endings to a documentary I have ever seen. So anyway,
one does not usually expect spicy endings to documentaries.
You don't. And I mean, maybe it's kind of giving away some of the impact to tell you that, but like when I watched it for the first time, I was like,
Stop spoilering the documentary.
Yeah. But anyway, it's on American Netflix, so I highly recommend it. And I just appreciate, Ashley, an opportunity to to recommend this to people. Yeah, Parabellum House, for some reason, like, really, that one, I've thought about making it private, but because I think,
girl, I've been there, so no, it doesn't hurt anything to do that.
It's not that I need to go back and rewatch it, because I just get enough comments on it that, like, I'm like, was I off that day? Like, I've not watched it in a long time, so I may need to go rewatch that one and see if I should just make it private. Well, maybe I didn't express
without knowing anything about the book, or specifically what you said in that video, I can almost guarantee that you were not off that day. It wasn't you.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I want to leave the possibility that it could be me.
C'est pas possible.
It's true. Yeah, if you do any sponsored content, you need to disclose. Like, also, they make it so easy now. You just put, like, paid promotion. You click that, and then you just put it in. It's not hard. Yes, exactly that. Let's see here. Always a red flag when people can't recognize faults in their favorite books, like Dude Bros. I respect it more when people can be like, yeah, made no sense, but boy, did it do it for me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, okay. Jennifer L. Armentrout fans are vicious. Well, we're reading that next month for...
It'll be on Amanda's channel. She can deal with it. They won't be commenting on my channel.
Yeah.
Also,
yeah, I don't know.
I think if I negatively reviewed on my channel, like a whole separate review, I don't know that anyone who's subscribed to me would be surprised or dismayed by that turn of events.
I mean, yeah, that's probably fair. It's maybe about the audience.
Yes, I do get hilarious comments on my Aurora Rising negative review. Because it's a lot of, like, I can just picture these, like, 12-year-old girls who are like, how dare you, you're being so mean to Mr. Kristoff. He worked hard on this, and you're being so unfair. And I'm just like, okie dokie. He's being paid very well for this. He is not in any danger of losing his home over my bad review.
Yeah, I don't remember, but isn't he an author who behaves badly? I don't remember the specifics, but I feel like
no, it's just that, like, his research for Nevernight involved, like, watching lesbian porn. Yep. It's just, it's not bad. It's research? Just not tasteful.
Well, I mean, watch what you want. Maybe just don't call it research.
I mean, I guess you could just,
more like a you thing.
How would a man who's writing a lesbian romance scene know what goes on in a lesbian romance scene without watching porn? Is the thinking there. I mean, I don't have a better. I guess my answer is maybe don't write that. Write what you know.
Oh, I lost where was it? Oh yeah, here we go. I'm reading The Blade itself, but I'm liking but not loving it. Don't send death threats. I
do think to the Jenny Nicholson, yeah. Something to the tone of an Abercrombie book. The kind of person who's reading it isn't getting, like, passionately, like, into how amazing this is. They're just, everybody in it has the attitude of, like, everything is shit. That's just how it be sometimes. So, like, when you read a bunch of books that are like that, your response isn't to then go attack people who may not like this thing whose thesis is that everything kind of sucks.
Yeah. No, it's true. Like, it's like, everything sucks.
Yeah, it's like, you didn't like it. Like, my internal monologue is just like, why am I not surprised? It's not to go and attack you.
I've always found the comment saying you didn't like it because you didn't understand it very interesting. Would love to know both of your thoughts on that kind of comment. I am open to that comment if it is in reference to some sort of specific cultural reference that maybe I didn't get. So, like, if there's I don't know, some kind of representation that I'm not a part of that community and I have a critique and someone says, hey, I think maybe you just didn't understand that this was coming from
or
this
trope
specific
conventions
myth
that you're
or
not familiar
yeah, like if it's something like that, sure, like I appreciate the elucidation. If it's like, well, you didn't like it, that must mean you just didn't understand it. Like that just seems like
I'll just say, like,
really
I mean,
infantilizing.
the type of good faith response that you're describing is never phrased as you didn't like it because you didn't understand it. Anyone who's phrasing
That's
it
true.
that way is not also here to educate you kindly on the part you may not have been aware of.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, I mean, so like I think there are good faith versions of it, but anybody who's like, well, you just don't, if you don't like it, it means you don't understand it. That's like a completely
Well, I mean, it's that kind of like
infantilizing.
circular logic of like, it is objectively good. Therefore, if you didn't like it, you just didn't get it because it is good. So the only option is to like it or to not get it. There is no third option.
Like,
Because
yeah,
it's
exactly. Yeah, it's a kind of black and white thinking that, I mean, again, this seems like really mean. I don't quite mean it as harshly as it's going to come out, but I do think that there's a certain level of like, that's just like, do you not live in the real world? Like, what in life is just like good or bad?
well, I do
You know what I
sometimes think
mean?
there is some piece of it, not maybe to everyone, but to certain people who have this reaction to fandom, is that this is their escape from the real world. And how dare you, like, you know,
Intrude
taint
upon
it with
that.
your criticism because this is their
Yeah.
one pure and perfect joy, and you're tainting it by pointing out that it's not actually perfect.
But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I just also see that like come up in discourse about like bigger, and maybe this is too serious for our book channel, but like, bigger political things or social. It's just like this idea of like good or bad. And I'm like, do you not live in the adult world where you have to like compromise with people or like,
No.
have things that you do and don't like about people in your life? I don't know. I'm always like, what is this world, this dream world you're living in? But anyway.
I feel like for the most part, you'll find that they are men who have never encountered compromise.
I think that's a really good insight of just like, no, if I'm, assertive enough, eventually I just get what I want. It's like, oh, okay. Well,
I said it aggressively. Were you not listening to me? There it is. Now you understand.
I think this is true on the Christie thing, that there's like a certain elitism because it's like a little bit of a classic. So it's sort of like the James Joyce dude bro crowd adjacent.
Oh boy.
Yes, people put Amari on hold. I mean, if Ashley says we're gonna love it, I'm gonna believe her. Also, I think Jess Owens really loved it. I'm seeing really good early reviews, basically, and I'm very excited to read it. Let's see here. At the end of my videos, just to see how many people watch all the way through, because I'm always curious. Oh, that's interesting. I feel like I saw that a lot, like the Snap Squad. Do you remember? Well, I don't know that you're a big beauty YouTube watcher, but like in circa 2017 and 18, they were always going on about like the Snapchat fam, and like they would tell people on their Snapchat to leave a certain emoji on their new YouTube upload as like a engagement strategy. So anytime I see that, I'm like, it sends me back to the Snapchat fam days. It is a good, interesting. Maybe I'll try that. Stay tuned. Maybe I'll do that and see how many of you actually stay through my whole like.
I'll just skip ahead to the part where you tell me what it is and then
wrote outro. Well, or I guess you could just look in the comments and see what the emoji everyone is commenting is. But I'll put that in as an Easter egg. Thank you, Myona. Oh, yeah. Have you seen the new Game in Colors?
I know that there are new ones, but I haven't, no.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Supernatural creatures. I guess it depends on how one defines supernatural. Preternatural? Paranormal?
I mean, my dad ruined magic for me when I was a kid. We were hiking and he said, well, magic is just something for which there is no explanation. And as soon as you have explained how it works, then it is not magic anymore. Now you have how it works and it is now science. And I was just like, but magic. And he was like, no.
Yeah, I would also try to have this conversation with my professors in grad school about like magic and religion, and that being on a like theology and magic being very similar, and they didn't seem really very into that. as a topic. So I stopped bringing it up. But all these things I think exist sort of on a continuum.
Yeah.
Shout out to Murder, She Wrote. It is on the Peacock Network for those of you who live here in the US.
How much are they paying you?
They're paying me nothing. This is like Murderbot. I do this proselytizing for free because I believe in the message of the good news of Murder, She Wrote. Anything with murder. Murderbot, Murder, She Wrote. I love it all.
That's why you're going to read Abercrombie. I see.
Yes, Ashley also is shouting out Paris is Burning. Actually, it is fantastic.
On a kind of related note, I know you're going to read Before They Are Hanged, and it's not spoilery to tell you that where Glocta's plotline goes is kind of investigatory.
Oh, well, I will enjoy that.
You will.
Okay. Yes, Christoph has done a couple of ill-judged things on Twitter.
Little side eye.
Charlie Bowwater,
the artist.
He don't know me. Do I know this person?
She does a lot of ACOTAR art. She has done some covers. She did the cover for Sorcery of Thorns, and she did the cover for something else too. She did the other Margaret Rogerson one, Enchantment of Ravens. I think she did the cover for the Bonecryer's Moon, maybe.
And we don't like her. She did something bad.
I don't know anything about this tea. I just know that she does a lot of fan art and a lot of cover art. So presumably she got into some kind of trouble over it, and he defended her.
Yeah.
I think there was some
Black creators made worthless noise when they criticized the artist of. Okay. Well, that's. Okay, I'm good. I think I'm good.
Whitewashing some characters when she did the art. Something like that.
Oh, okay.
So
see, I need to Jess cover this. If Jess hasn't covered this, I need her to catch me up. I miss things if she doesn't cover it. But this, yeah, it's a big yikes for me. I also didn't enjoy Aurora Rising, and I DNF'd Nevernight. So I think between all those things, maybe I'm just good on him.
Your new favorite author.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really? Some treatment in Star Wars. I didn't see that. That really bums me out.
It also surprises me knowing what kind of person she
actually really surprises me. Oh, that's a bummer. Okay, well, I think we're just seeing a whole list of red flags here. I think we're in a red flag factory at this point. Yeah.
I unhauled all my Jane Kristoff. Well, I still have Illuminae. He wrote that with Amy Kaufman.
Yeah, another Twitter. Yeah, so. Your opinion on Daniel Green's video on YA. Everyone's allowed to have their opinion.
I just feel like in order to have an opinion on YA, one should probably read some YA.
Yeah, probably.
It's my opinion. ...
We'll just leave that there. Yeah, exactly. I think that I have that in my about section. There's a book for every reader and a reader for every book. Like, you do you, boo. Let's see here. Okay, I've noticed this as well when I'm in chat. I don't know why it does that. It's like if I pick the lady who's shrugging, it shows the man who's shrugging, but then the female emoji, like to show, I don't know. It's a weird thing. Let's see here. I'm trying to, I think we're almost caught up with chat at this point. $150 on a Murder, She Wrote DVD box set, Never Regret Nothing. I think those are $150 very well spent. And Angela Lansbury thanks you.
Oh, I have a question for you about negative reviews.
Okay. Sorry.
What is
go for
it? Your approach or your take or your opinion on, or how important do you think it is to include a great deal of qualifying statements like, well, it's my opinion and the way that I took it was, and that like when I read it, I felt that maybe possibly, but you will feel differently, but that I don't know what their intent, like a lot of like preambling to actually getting what you're saying, as opposed to jumping right into like, this was bad to me, like instead of, you know what I mean?
I know why I see both sides of the argument there. I get why people are annoyed when people do it. I also know that those people probably haven't had to endure comment sections before jumping on people. So I understand why people who give a lot of disclaimers do it as well, because they're kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't. I do try to use I feel, I felt kind of language just as best practice in general, because like, it's my subjective opinion. So I think that's a good, just in my verb usage, to make it clear that that's the case. I try in my reviews to talk about what is more on my subjective opinion side and what things I think you could make a pretty strong argument are closer to being objective criticisms. So, like, I think my worst book of the year this last year was The Wrong Mr. Darcy. And I felt comfortable saying, I think objectively this book is bad for these reasons.
But talking about Sanderson.
Well, that's why I'm not going to read Sanderson as long as I have a book channel. I'm too scared from watching other people's comments. So I did it once and I'm not going to do it again. But yeah, like I do try to make it clear when I'm talking about like, hey, this is why I didn't like something, but I don't usually really feel the need to give like a full preamble about like, this is my opinion, whatever. I know you don't do that either.
I was gonna say, because I mean, with the exception of like, I mean, a little bit of language to like acknowledge the fact that tastes may vary, I do think it's implied in the very nature of the content that is being produced. This is a book review. Therefore, this is my take on what this book is and how I felt about it. So like, yeah. I think by coming into it, like, unless I'm sitting there saying that like everyone who reads this will feel this way about it, like unless you're actually saying that, like it's understood that this is how you felt about this book and that's what we are here to hear.
Yeah, I mean, like if I was going to give a full-on really salty review about something I knew was super popular, I probably would succumb to that temptation just because, I've seen your comment section.
That one I did have a lengthy preamble saying I went into it expecting to like it, hoping to like it, and trying very much to like it for a large chunk of it. So I said all that to no avail. It helped me not at all. So
I mean, so people who are going to be mad are just going to be mad. I think it can help people who like, because when you hear somebody criticizing a book you like, it is natural to feel like they're almost criticizing you. You know what I mean? Like, I get that kind of impulse of like, but I like this and you don't like it. Are you saying you don't like me? I think that's like kind of an instinctual response. So I think giving that preamble can be a way to sort of like remind people to disengage that lizard part of their brain and be like, this is not about you. This is about something you like. It's not you. It's something you like. Mm-hmm. So I think it can maybe divert the less passionate people, but yeah, I think people who are just going to be mad if you criticize it are just going to be mad. So it doesn't really do any good.
Although, so I kind of wanted to bring this up earlier and then I forgot, like when you're seeing a negative review for something, that you like, and like it makes you reflect on what you truly do and do not forgive in books. But also I discovered this when I was doing like reacting to 1-star reviews type of video, that I mean, it did make me briefly question, like, am I being unreasonable or offensive in my negative reviews? And then I was like, no, I'm not. But like negative reviews for specifically, the biggest offender of this was A Little Hatred, which is Joe Abercrombie's the first book in his new trilogy. And in that book, he's had female main characters before, but in his new trilogy, there are even more. So like instead of maybe like an 80-20 situation, it's more of a 60-40 situation. So like there's definitely more female characters, but it's not like it's never been done in his books before. But the 1-star reviews were saying that like this book is like YA because of these female perspectives, and that he just thinks he has to write edgy females, and that there's females in it everywhere, and that like this is the
wait, it's YA because there's female perspectives.
I mean, that was the implication because the thoughts followed each other. And what's funny to me is that like all of the characters in it are over 30, basically, except for one character. So I was like, just by that metric alone, you're wrong. And then the fact that one person went like super hard into complaining about the fact that like, like they're like that Abercrombie was trying to prove something, I guess, because like Savine is where you're in her perspective. And she's a very, very wealthy lady who's very heavy into politics and money. And like she's always having to like wheel and deal and like put a beautiful face on things. And she's menstruating and she's wearing a tightly laced up corset. And she is absolutely miserable through this entire like dinner. And she keeps thinking about how miserable she is, but she keeps smiling and they keep offering her fancy food. And she wants to throw up everywhere because she's menstruating. And like this whole scene is like her like putting a very charming face on like constant misery. And like it was
basically a good representation of the female experience in general.
Yeah. And so then like this person saying like how it's gratuitous and all this kind of thing. I was like, you know what Abercrombie writes his men thinking about? Their balls and their dicks and pissing everywhere and needing to shit. He's writing what his characters would logically be thinking about in that moment. It would, of course, Savine was thinking about that. You had no problem with him describing all the men's fruits in all the other books. So screw you.
Well, like I'm just stuck on this association of female perspective as being associated with YA, which I do think in fantasy, like in terms of high fantasy, it's still kind of a novelty to have a meaningful percentage of the book be from female perspectives, and like what a sad state of affairs that is.
Yeah. So yeah, reading those 1-star reviews didn't make me go, oh, maybe there's some flaws to this book that I wasn't seeing. It was making me go, you guys are all horrible misogynists and I hate all of you.
Like, yeah, I don't know. In the year of our Lord 2021, with everything that's going on, you know, we're living in the Civil War or whatever, like, I just don't have time for misogynistic bullshit these days. It's like, I'm so over it.
Someone giving a 1-star review to a book I like affects me not at all, and I would never want to leave an angry comment. But when I saw their reasons for it, I was like, out the hateful typing comes. Like, you should die for this opinion.
I think Mayona brings up a good point here. She's talking about she does longer preambles on if a book is by a booktuber because they're more likely to see it. Have you reviewed anything from a booktuber? I have, I guess. I've reviewed from Alexa Dunn, and I've got another one of hers that's coming out in the spring that I'm going to review. But I think that's actually probably a good. I hadn't thought about that, Mayona, but I probably should do that. Well, especially like if you know them, I would do that if I knew, like, I feel like I'm friendly with Alexa. So I feel like that probably does warrant some sort of like, hey, even if I'm trying to be unbiased, I probably have some level of like, I like this person, so I probably am being generous to this book.
On that note, as much as it would be like a dream come true of mine to be able to interview Joe Abercrombie or Neil Gaiman or Pierce Brown or any of my favorites, like there's a part of me that's like, that's not respecting the boundary of reviews are for readers and not for authors. Like to have the author on your channel, like it's right up there with sponsored content. Where are you going to be honest about them still?
That's the thing. I
know they're good, but like
I've had a little bit of author interaction on my channel, but not much. And I kind of am more on your side with that of like, I think it's just hard. It's like I would be comfortable having authors on whose work I was not going to review because then we could just like chat about whatever. But I would feel weird about having, unless it was an author who like, even if I didn't like specific ones of their books, on the whole, I knew like Alona Andrews or Rebecca Roanhorse or Alyssa Cole. Like if it's like, okay, even if there's like one-offs that I don't like as much, on the whole, I know that I like you. I have positive things that we can talk about and it's genuine. But yeah, I don't know. I do think it introduces a weird element of,
I mean, in the way that like reviewers are almost like checks and balances on the, like, not that this is like legislature, but like, you know what I mean? Like we are here to be the answering voice to what's put forth by the author and to like, yeah, it's
Yeah, it's like it's bringing the authors into reader spaces in a way that I just think creates some interesting tensions. It's not that it can't be done well. I just think it has to be done thoughtfully. And I will say I've seen situations where people are getting authors on their channels and it does seem like it's affecting their opinions in a way that I think is a little
like a panel type situation. I mean, like the Social Distance Book Fest was just like, you know,
yeah,
you're just a moderator at that point, and like I don't really have a problem with that at all in any way. It's not even like I have a less of a problem. Like that seems absolutely normal because like you would have like at cons and stuff, you need someone to moderate. It makes sense to have somebody who's known as a reader and can discuss books to be a moderator. But yeah, the one-on-one reviews, it feels weird.
it's a little bit different. Yeah. And I mean,
It's a little bit
it
like
is interesting.
in the water that you drink.
Yeah, I mean, like Alexa hopefully is going to come on and we're going to do a live stream about YA thrillers at some point. But I hadn't thought about that. I probably,
also,
yeah,
she's
I
also
guess
a content creator, so I feel like that's slightly also different again.
it
Like,
is a little bit because it's like, yeah, it's like, yeah, I don't know. Parasocial relationships, man, they're just like a tangly thing. But you know, I think I would only do that with authors who, like in Alexa's case, it's like I know her a little bit as a person. You know, we're not going to get, even if I ended up hating a book of hers, like I know she's not going to get wild with me. You know what I mean? Like,
you hope.
I hope. I don't know. I have faith. Let's see here. Ooh, Bethany, some tea. Bethany's just spilling tea all over the place tonight.
Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is very true. I think female authors are more likely to be pushed into YA as well, even if the book is more adult, which frankly, I think kind of happened to Susan Dennard, because honestly, her books really do read more like adult fantasy than YA to me.
That's when content creators have to fill in the gap and be like, these are good YA books for when you're trying to bridge your way into high fantasy, because these are basically high fantasy that was published as YA.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. Like I saw someone trying to say the Poppy War was YA the other day. Like,
I mean, there's a lot of there's a few series that like you always see mischaracterized. Like you always see Red Rising, Nevernight, The Shades of Magic. Those are always like accidentally, incorrectly lumped in with YA, and you're always like, no.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely books that I think of as good transitional books between YA and adult, one way or the other. Like I would say Susan Dennard, if you are a YA reader wanting to get into adult fantasy, she might be a good one for you to try as sort of a bridge in either direction. And Sanderson, frankly, from what I've read of him, I think would be a good transition from YA into adult. You know, so fair enough. But like Poppy War. Poppy War shit gets real. Like I wouldn't just casually hand that to like a 13-year-old.
More factors than the age of the characters. By that token, then A Song of Ice and Fire is YA.
Yeah. Well, that would be a really interesting sell, I think.
Snow is 4 years old. Daenerys is like 13 years old, so it sounds like middle grade to me.
Yeah. So yeah, why not? Come on. Let's see here. Oh, that's interesting. Bringing in an author for Q&A. I've heard authors say that they really enjoy doing that, especially during the pandemic, since they've not had as many kind of traditional ways to promote books. So I definitely very much agree with this. Authors really shouldn't read or watch reviews themselves. Let their publisher, agent, whoever, do it and give them the bullet points. I've always thought if I published a book, probably what I would do is ask our little Witchlands group chat to go read some reviews and bring me some highlights back, because like I totally get the impetus and like how tempting it is to want to know what people are saying about something, but I just think it's not good for authors' mental health.
I also think authors, as most adult humans, really need to self-reflect, because I do absolutely think there are authors who have are able to and can look at negative reviews and it not like destroy them, and they're not going to immediately start tweeting about it. Like, you have to know yourself. You have to know if that's going to affect you so much that you can't really write, or that you're going to get mad about it, or you're going to get upset, or if you as a person know that you can take it and you're going to go subject yourself to it. Just know yourself.
Yeah, I think self-awareness is key. But then again, the authors who get into the worst situations, it's so clear that self-awareness is just like not in the equation. So it's like,
because like I would be completely unsurprised to learn that like someone like Joe Abercrombie has seen negative. Actually, I do know that he has, because he tweeted out his favorites. And not negatively, like he wasn't attacking them. He just straight up tweeted out his favorite negative reviews. I was like, oh, this one was pretty funny.
Yeah, like this one's good. Ashley is attesting to the fact that she has had authors trying to explain away her critiques, which I do think, I've not had that happen, but I've heard enough people saying it happens to them that clearly it does.
Yeah. I feel like I give off a vibe that's kind of prickly, and I feel like people just wouldn't.
You know, for good or ill, I do think I tend to give off sort of like a pretty like school marmy, like authoritarian
my mom
vibe.
said that you are so sincere, and I was like, more sincere than me? And she was like, you're sincere, but not like Mara. And I was like, thanks, Mom. So you're
thanks,
a big
Mom's library. Yeah. Let's see here. Saying that teenagers in YA fantasies don't feel like teenagers but 30 years old. Yeah, I do have that critique of a lot of YA. I do think in fantasy I have more room for it, because it's like, you know, they're living in an intense world where they have to grow up faster. So, you know, I think it just sort of to me, this is a suspension of disbelief thing. And I literally just spent the entire weekend editing a video about suspension of disbelief. So like,
well, I mean, I feel like it's not even necessarily fantasy. It's just anything that involves a lot of adversity. So if it's a war story, and like if it's like World War II and he's like 14 years old, but like he's in the middle of a war and had to figure out how to protect his family, like I'd believe you grow up real fast, like in a situation like that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and like I don't like YA romance in contemporaries, because it always makes me feel like a weird, like just skeevy. I'm like, I'm a 33-year-old lady. Like, I just don't want to read about 16-year-olds kissing, like in our world. But in like ye old fantasy world, I'm like, oh, like in their world, they're like, this would be the equivalent of reading about like two 20-year-olds or 22-year-olds. So
I was like, I don't know if you watch Alex Meyer's channel, but he does a lot of like videos discussing a lot of popular TV shows and movies that are like teen stuff and like, you know, that kind of thing. And he was reviewing Outer Banks, that show on Netflix. And he was like, just your average everyday 30-year-old, 17-year-old.
Yeah, basically. I mean, yeah, in fantasy and dystopias, I feel like that's pretty common of like, okay, life has not treated you kindly, and you are wise beyond your years as a result of it. Or
also, the people cast to play them are always, they look the age that we're imagining these people to be, because we're imagining 30-year-olds.
Also, doesn't it like, it cracks me up now as an adult rewatching some of the teen movies I watched as a kid. Well, because that, but like, I'm even thinking like the Scream movies, and now watching it, I'm like, who are these like, ancient people playing teenagers?
What I find really funny about Riverdale is that like the cast in it, there's like kind of a wide variety of ages there. But like the one that I think out of the core like main characters, the one that looks the youngest, the one that could potentially believably be 17, is Cole Sprouse, who plays Jughead Jones, and of all of them, he is the oldest. He is older than all of them. I feel weird
though, because I remember watching him on the like, what was that show? Sweet Life of Zach and Cody.
He's my age.
I know, but in my mind, he just seems like he's a baby, and it just feels weird, and I don't know.
Like the other young people, like one of them is like, when he started the show, he was like barely 20 or something, so that's kind of borderline. But he looks like 10 years older than Cole Sprouse.
Yeah, burning out 25-year-old teenagers. And I want to be clear, I adore the Scream trilogy. I am particularly fond of Scream 3, which I know is a minority opinion, but I rewatch that every Halloween. So I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying that one day I was like, oh, now that I'm like the same age as these actors, I realize like these are not 16-year-olds.
It's not an age thing, but like it similarly reminds me of like the first time like I went back to rewatch my favorite animated movies, where the first time I watched Thumbelina again as like a person with a maturely formed brain, and I was like, oh wow, they fell in love during the song. There really wasn't any more development or interaction at all. They met and started singing, and by the end of the song, they were in love. And I was like, that didn't bother me when I was a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, well, of course they're in love. That's how the story goes.
Well, and there's this one like singer from the 60s, and he all of his songs are basically about like him preying on underage girls, and I didn't realize it until I was an adult. And I was like, I forget who the artist is, but he like one like young girl get out, that one. Do you know that song? Okay, he has several of these, but they're all basically like that one. Literally, the chorus is "Young girl, get out of my mind. My love for you is way out of line. Get along, girl. You're much too young, girl." Like
that sounds like that ABBA song.
Literally, it's like a predatory song. Now I'm gonna have to Google who this guy is. I feel like it was like Gary something.
I don't know.
Gary Puckett and the Union Gap.
Definitely have never heard of that.
I wasn't fully aware that music was made past 1970 until I was like 12. So a lot of my references are
I just listened to what my parents were listening to, and I was mainly like classic rock and that kind of thing. So if you were talking about Queen or Boston or Kansas or Fleetwood Mac or Dire Straits, I'd be like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're at 2 hours, and I'm turning into a pumpkin because I'm an old these days with my medicine.
You're also in a different time than me.
Oh yeah, that's true.
It's only 8 o'clock here. It's time to start the live show.
But I feel like this is we covered a lot of ground here. I think are kind of some of our takeaways. Oh yes, shout out to Scream 3. I love it, and I think it's very relevant in the Harvey Weinstein Me Too era. So anyway, the next Halloween, go back and rewatch Scream 3. It holds up. Oh, hey, Chelsea. Oh, they covered that on Glee? Why did they cover that on Glee? That's a weird song to cover. But I think the TLDR here is I think negative reviews are actually really important. And I think normalizing people doing them and audiences not freaking out on them would be helpful for our overall discourse, because I think it's
positive
valuable.
Reviews are meaningless without negative reviews.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think, it's sort of like you have to have the light and the dark.
Mm-hmm. Just can you imagine if movies didn't get negative reviews?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to imagine, like, there are some books that it's very hard for me to imagine someone not liking it, but clearly they do. Had a crush on her teacher and he sang that to her.
Well,
that's a lot to take in. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Glee was wild. I think that's fair.
I never watched Glee.
But yeah, no, I appreciate everyone coming. It's good to be back on live. We will be back next week. Next week, we will have more guests. Ashley and Bethany are going to join me, and we are going to talk about how we read as much as we do, because it has come to my attention that certain people think that people are lying about the number of books that they read, and we are not. So we thought we would.
Wait, you really actually read all those books?
It turns out I actually do, because I have so many other things I could lie to people about. It is not going to be how many books I read. But anyway, so we will have live not same time next week. Next week, I think it's a half hour earlier. But thank you for joining me, Liene. I appreciate you helping me get back into my live stream groove.
My absolute pleasure, as always. Being at Live Like Whoa.
Yeah, Live Like Whoa. We will see you guys next week. Have a great night. Bye.